Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. This is the Comprehensivist Wednesdays that we do in collaboration with the Great Philadelphia Thinking Society. Today we are starting a new series. This is a pilot. And this is right in the area of comprehensivism. Because what we are going to do is that we are going to take three topics. I'm currently calling it triangulation. We'll come up with a better name. I'm not happy with the name, but it's three things. We'll always consider three things in this series. And those could be ideas, those could be thinkers, those could be fields. And then we are going to see various relationships between them. We'll focus on individual of these three things and use the others as a foil, as a partner, as in all kinds of relations, so that we can understand each of them better by the time we leave. Today, we're starting out with three ideas of Buckminster Fuller. This is kind of combination of the series that we are doing on great ideas of Buckminster Fuller and this new three, triangulation. So Maritza is going to talk about three ideas of Buckminster Fuller. Keep notes on the ideas, on the relations that you see, and we will slowly go. I still don't have an already set way of exploring these three things, but it comes very naturally to me, and I think through most people. The moment you see three things, you're able to see contrast, and you can use two of them together as a foil against the other. It's all kinds of things that can be done with it. And let's explore together, and slowly we will build that into a method of going through three things like that. All right. So with that, let me hand it over to Maritza to give the descriptions of these three items.
Okay, now I can unmute. Got it. So we're looking at precession, integrity, and universe. So precession it refers to the indirect or unintended consequences of our actions. So it represents the ripple effects that occur beyond the immediate and visible outcomes. So in the context of the whole, precession reminds us that our choices and actions have repercussions that extend far beyond our immediate awareness. It emphasizes the need for considering long-term consequences and understanding the complex web of our interconnections, within universe, right? So, we were not doing universe, Shrikant. I'm sorry. It's we decided precession, integrity, and trim tab. Yes.
Yes.
Sorry. So in my mind, I get confused because I think universe threads through all of them. Apologies. So the in integrity it involves maintaining, kind of an essential stability, coherence, and harmony of a system or structure. So it is the quality of being whole and undivided. And these descriptions are tailored with Buckminster Fuller's views of the concept in mind. So for integrity in the context of the whole, integrity becomes a guiding principle for our thoughts, actions, and decision-making processes. So the belief here is that by acting with integrity, we align ourselves with the interconnectedness, again, of the universe. And this helps to contribute to its overall coherence. Integrity emphasizes for us the importance of acting ethically, responsibly, and in harmony with the underlying principles of nature. So when we're looking at trim tab is the idea of, doing, it's the concept of of doing the power of the small, right? So when we look at trim tab, it's derived from the concept of maritime engineering, where there it refers to the small rudder that is used to control the movement of a larger rudder. So in Bucky's philosophy, what he's saying to us is that trim tab is a symbol of the power of the small strategic interventions used to create significant shifts and to steer the course of larger systems. So when we look at these concepts together, we see that we were saying, precession highlights the importance of understanding the indirect effects of our actions, while the trim tab encourages us to leverage the small interventions for significant change. And both of these concepts are rooted in the interconnectedness that underscores our responsibility to act with integrity and to consider the well-being of the whole. So, if we look at these, I believe that by embracing these concepts collectively, we can approach problem solving and decision making with a more holistic perspective. And that will help us strive, I guess, more positively towards a transformation within our world. So if you can't, that's my synopsis of these.
Let me make a slight change because this is, we are experimenting with this. I do think that universe is something that would go very well with precession and integrity. But so let's go ahead and describe universe, and then let's talk about which three of them we should consider together. Okay, I don't want to consider four. I want to consider only three. But then I'm going, my intuition is that universe, precession, and integrity will make a much better base for description. But let's go ahead and describe our universe, and then let's talk about which ones.
Right. So universe, in this context, it encompasses the entirety of existence, including the physical cosmos, the natural world, and the interconnected web of all phenomena. It represents the grand totality and interplay of all things. So if, what we do is we're viewing the universe as a member of the whole, and this will apply to us that we're recognizing that we ourselves are part of a larger cosmic order. And, this concept of universe or way of conceiving universe emphasizes to us, again, I've used the word a lot in the descriptions, but it emphasizes the interconnectedness with everything around us. And then the responsibility that we have, as stewards of the earth. And it's through attempting to understand universe as a whole is where I believe, and I see that Buckminster Fuller is trying to show us, it's the path towards gaining a broader perspective and developing a deeper sense of unity and shared destiny, even with all of creation.
Thank you. Let me read out the definition of Bucky. It says, universe is the aggregate of all humanities consciously apprehended and communicated experiences. So it is experiences. So the aggregate of all humanities consciously apprehended and communicated experiences. Okay, so now the first question for you. We'll normally not do this. We'll get better at kind of picking three, but which three should we choose? We have to choose three. Okay, so we got precession, integrity. So precision, you can use the word P. Integrity is I. Universe is U. And trim tab is T. So you can put three letters in the chat. Which three should we consider together? Let's vote. Got one IUT. IUT again. PIU, PIU, okay, ITU, IUT, PTI, so that is PTI, okay. Let's see here. ITU, how many votes were there? Let me just make sure. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 votes. I've got 6 votes. Maritza, would you like to vote?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't know if I can. I might cheat and go with the populace.
We got PIU, PIU, okay. Let's see, so PIU. Okay, so it's really between PIU and IUT. So PIU and IUT, those are the two close ones. And let me see, PIU and IUT. Let's see, IUT. IUT will work too. IUT will work. PIU will also work. Okay. All right. So we got both of them. Which one shall we choose? Which one shall we choose? Okay.
Are they the same exact number of votes?
What's that? It's exactly the same number of votes.
Oh no.
So let's do one thing. Maritza, you vote, and Bill, you vote, because both of you, Bill, there's nobody else who has voted PT.
Voted.
So go ahead and choose, both of you choose either PIU or IUT.
Okay.
Which one would you prefer? Don't be influenced by each other. Just go ahead and pick something.
Okay.
Okay, we got IUT and PIU. Okay, so we got another tie. Okay, so let's see.
No.
Okay, let's see. All right, so this is very, very interesting. So PIU and IUT. All right, so now let's do one thing. Okay, now we're going to do this. Folks, defend your choice. Why do you think you want to do PIU? And why do you want to do IUT? Okay, that itself will produce very interesting results. Okay, go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you would like. And so this is like a debate, you know. This is called, I think it's Oxford style debate. So we have two sides, pro and against. Okay, so for IUT and against IUT. Okay, each side gets to speak, and after that it is done, you do another vote, and whichever one wins, carries the day. All right, so we're going to do an Oxford style debate of which three you should consider and why. Don't take too long, like a minute or two, but that by itself is going to be very interesting. Okay, so go ahead and type an exclamation mark in order to talk about which one should we go for. So Maritza, go ahead.
So I'm going with IUT because, well, and the idea of anything without integrity, naturally, I just couldn't fathom. But so precession is the direct or unintended consequences of our action. So I feel like it's going to be lurking in the background, even when we're discussing integrity, universe, and trim tab. So that's why I'm like, oh, it's going to tag along sneakily anyway. So we might as well pick the other three.
Okay, let's formulate the debate more crisply. What is common to both those sides? There are two debating sides, but IU are there on both sides. Okay, universe is there. Universe, remember, this is universe as conceived by Buckminster Fuller. Okay, the total aggregate. And then we've got integrity, but it's taken for granted. So the only question on the table is, should precession or trim tab be the one that should be added to these two? So we're going to start with Jeannie because she's raising too many hands.
Okay, what I wanted to say is that precession and trim tab are basically the same principle. Now, precession is a more generalized principle, whereas trim tab is actually a smaller example of a precession type arrangement. So either one is basically the same. One, you'll be talking about something that's more specific, but I'd really love to explain a little more about precession. So that's my bias.
Okay, wonderful. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Bill. Joe.
I think precession actually, because it actually captures everything that's within the system. There's 6 basic movements within precession, so that it's supposed to be a coherent system that Bucky's talking about. So these are all the movements within the universe. And I think that integrity also fits within that, in the sense that the universe actually has integrity as well. As well as it does, as Jeannie was saying, that we kind of will touch on trim tab, and we'll talk about the integrity of the particulars, like, our cells, or social structures, or physical structures, and universe itself. And I think each one of these are talking about a coherent system. And I think that that's what would be the thing that we could tie together between the two. That being said, I like trim tab too.
Go ahead.
No, I just said I like trim tab too. So I mean,
let me ask a clarificatory question to Jeannie, because she's made a fundamental point here. Are you saying, can you repeat what you said about the relationship between precession and trim tab?
Precession is a generalized principle. It's a principle in physics that exists, throughout the universe. And trim tab is just an example of how you use precession as a tool to accomplish things that you wouldn't expect.
So, okay, so precession, you're saying, is a wider category within which trim tab exists. Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. Next up is Bill.
Thanks. So here's why I chose P, precession, integrity. Oh, did I make a mistaken vote? Yeah, I was asked secondarily, I chose PIU, but my initial choice was PTI, and here's why.
No, PTI, we are not debating right now.
Oh, we're just debating PIU, me defending my vote for PIU?
What's that?
So I'm just defending my vote for PIU?
Yes.
Okay, precession. So I don't know engineering or physics or architecture. I know political economy. I know human relationships in society, in the economy, in the polity. And precession is all over the place in these kind of relationships. And the reason is that behavior has unintended consequences. And so to take that into account, that's taken into account usually through contracts of various kinds in the economy, but also in society and politics. And what those contracts are doing is they're structuring incentives in a way where these precession dynamics get taken into account and channeled into a mutually cooperative direction. The big example would be perfectly competitive markets, where no one's orchestrating the whole system, but each individual doing what they want to do conduces generally to the market's lift all boats. But there's examples in social relationships, there's example in the political system. So that's precession in social relationships. And then the next in the 3 was No,
you don't need to talk about I or you, because because I and you are common to both of them. We don't need to debate that. We just have to debate precession versus trim tab. So it's good. This is good. You've already made the point.
So I should stop there.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So now everybody who had typed the exclamation mark. So now I have to make a decision. I do have a tie vote. I did not vote. And I think the Jeannie's argument is quite definitive. Okay. Because what you're saying is that this is all about both trim tab and precession is about how one thing affects another. Precession is a much larger category of things, and trim tab is properly viewed as a kind of precession which has got the maximum leverage. What is it that you move that will have the maximum leverage? So I think precession is wider, and we're talking about the other two that are there are also in the same category, integrity and universe. Okay, so precession goes right with us. So we're going to be talking about those three. Okay, precession, integrity, universe. Maritza, does that make sense to you? Yeah. Okay. Very
As soon
good.
as Jeannie put it out that way, I was like, oh yes, I agree.
Thank you, Jeannie. And anytime you have such things to say, use as many hands as possible. Zoom hands, your hands, left hand, right hand, everything, and wave them so they go in and out. So it's like it shows that it's many, many hands. All right. Thank you. All right. So let's talk about these three: integrity, universe, and precession. Okay. So first, let's talk about. So there is, first we want to do commonality. There is commonality and there is difference. Let's start with difference. How is precession related to the other two? So we are trying to pick one up and say, what is its relationship to the other two? So, and let's try to keep it very brief. We're talking about these ideas. So let's try to keep it very brief. We'll have multiple people talking about it. So we can either start with precession, integrity, or universe. I'm choosing to start with precession because it is it is relatively, it happens within the integrity and it happens within the universe. So let's talk about precession first. What is precession and how is it related to the universe? How is it related to integrity? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to talk about what is the role, how is precession connected to the other two? We'll start with Jeff. Jeff.
Well, this is just sort of a best guess, but it seems to me that precession starts with the fundamental principle that there are things that we don't know that might have a very consequential effect on decisions that we make that sort of by definition will have to be based on things we think we know within whatever we consider to be the whole. And so precession is this recognition of unintended consequences and unforeseen synchronicities and and hidden trim tabs. And so in a way, precession is an admission. It's virtually an acceptance and appreciation of intellectual humility. So that's my guess.
Wonderful. Thank you. Jeff. It was a great point. It starts with the acceptance of, nature is what it is, and you have to have that humility that you understand some things. There are going to be lots of interactions, and that's the kind of epistemological attitude towards precession. Next up is going to be Maritza, Jeannie, and Sho. Maritza.
If I'm looking at precession and integrity, I think that the relationship there is that precession reminds us of the importance of acting like in alignment with maybe our internal values and principles, as it were. And as we cultivate integrity and we're making conscious choices, we can minimize the unintended negative consequences, and so that the precessional effects around us will be more positive effects because of doing that. Like, I think if we consider it, so precession reminds us that, everything we touch touches something else. And if we keep that in mind, I think it's a very natural guiding light, as it were, for, moving forward with increased integrity. Are we only talking about precession and integrity right now, Shrikant?
Only about precession as it connects to integrity and universe.
Okay, so if I were to also consider it, the relationship between precession and universe, it's again this considering that our actions are going to have consequences that reach and extend far further than we would naturally consider in general. If we accept that the universe is going to be responding to our energetic vibrations, our thoughts and our intentions, and reflecting back to us whatever resonance it is that we're creating through precession, then I think that initial actions will be more contemplative and more intentional instead of haphazard, because we already have in mind that precession is a factor in all of this, and that everything is going to affect universe.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you, Maritza. So it's very interesting how each person is bringing, kind of a different angle onto this concept. For example, Maritza talked about really implicitly principle, kind of acting on principle, which is a core piece of Bucky's way of operating, saying, what is it that I do that's going to be good for everybody? And I'm going to focus on that. So once you focus on that, lots of negative precession that happens goes down because you're starting that way. So how do you need to start to have, at the same time, all the positive precessions increase? So that's what the principle does, is it kind of channels you along those things. So great. Thank you for pointing that out. Next up is Jeannie, Joe, and Mona. Jeannie.
I agree, Maritza. To me, okay, let me start with precession and universe. The universe, everything is spinning, everything is moving, down from the smallest to the largest. Everything is in motion. And this is the basis of precession. And I hate the word unintended consequences. It's a cop-out. It's not true. What it is we're not thinking about what we're doing before we do it. Or we're just taking one tiny little thing and aiming that way without thinking. Everything else is in motion. And when we make, it's just unintended, yeah, because we didn't think about it. And the integrity is, I think, maybe doing that, actually thinking about what we do before we just blast in there and screw things up, because we are doing a terrible job and we want to say, we didn't intend to do that. No, we got to think about what we're doing. Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Jeannie. See, again, Jeannie brought up another concept of responsibility that is associated with acting, of saying, respect all the movement that is taking place and work very hard, take the responsibility for your actions to do that. Because precession exists and universe is one thing, there is having integrity and taking responsibility is equivalent to each other. Wonderful. Thank you. This is just incredible. Maritza, this is a great idea, doing this three-part thing. We're getting so much mileage already.
Enjoying it.
Thank you. Next up is Joe, Mona, and Bill. Joe.
Yeah, so when I think about the idea of precession, I think I always start with, unities, plural, and minimum too. And then so you start what makes the system complex from there. And that's what precession actually does. So he starts to explain the universe within that context. So then there are 6 motions, as I talked about, but one thing that Fuller had talked about is looking beyond the 180 degrees of just our perception. So that's where what gets to what Jeannie was saying is about the unintended consequences, and that we only look at things as a win-loss scenario. Actually, I was in a conversation about this and it starts to have us look at things in more of a non-zero sum game, as opposed to, a winner and a loser. And so that's where it's kind of getting us to look at the whole and work together. And yes, that there are bodies, and the other thing is bodies, emotions, body or what is it? I guess it's bodies in motion against bodies in motion. And while there are processional effects to that may have negative outcomes, that we can attempt to essentially do a better job in creating a more holistic approach to solving the world's problems, whether it be ecologically or even just through integrity itself. And that's another aspect of integrity that actually comes into play. So the integrity of our relationships is also related to the interconnectedness, and the interconnectedness is related directly to Precession. So, I mean, these are all how, and this is how nature works as well. So some of the things that we've talked about in the example of the bumblebee, what the bumblebee is actually doing in addition to just pollinating, it's doing much more. So that's my initial thought when I think about that, is to think beyond the 180 degrees. And I think actually Jeff was spot on. These are using generalized principles because there is an unseen. And when you have an unseen, then I don't know what that is. Anyway, my thumb is going up for some reason. It's like, anyway, but anyway, it's yeah, I mean, the unseen is the reason you use generalized principles, because there is an element of humility. So that's also a really important point when we're thinking about Fuller's it's Veritas.
Sure. So thank you. One point that Joe brought up, which is very interesting, is that he started by saying unity. This is again Bucky's idea that unity is minimum 2. Okay. Another way of formulating it is the I-thou relationship. So being conscious of the other and regarding the other as not being other, but having that respect for the other. And what that does is that it actually transforms the relationships that you have. It is that respect and love for the other as if it was you. It's this another way of formulating the principle of saying, do things that would be good for everybody. That kind of solves lots of these problems just in one stroke. Thank you. Next up is going to be Mona. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say the best way I've actually heard it explained is through Martin Buber's I-thou relationship. And actually that's also captured in the Gita as well. So these are all kind of connected to one another, and it's actually seeing yourself, it's oneness within plurality.
Yes, wonderfully put. I mean, Gita, like the Namaste principle, where you're saying the God in you greets the God in me greets the God in you. Because the moment you say that, you've established a commonality with respect to which you look at everything else. And that is completely transformative. Next up is going to be Mona, Bill, Katie, and Jeannie. Mona.
Yes, thank you. I was going to apologize for going in a different direction with the connections, also creating a triad. but you mentioned Gita, so now I don't feel like I have to apologize. So Gita was one of them because it made me think, Precession made me think of the words of Krishna to Arjuna. It was like, do it all in my name. Like, don't, you do what you think is best, but do it and don't think about the consequences or the fruits of your actions, because you can't possibly tell what that's going to be. And so that's one thing that came to mind. And another story that came to mind is the story of the Chinese farmer, you know, with the horse that ran away, and everyone said, what bad luck was that? And then bad luck turned to be good luck, which turned to be bad luck again, which turned to be good. It's like, how can we possibly tell, like, in the grand scheme of things, what's best? I mean, we can say right now, we can feel right now, we can dedicate our actions to the higher good, but we can't possibly tell. That's my feel.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So I really like the principle of not being attached, the Gita principle that you brought in. The version of that in Genesis would be, don't just focus on the fruit. Focus on the vine that is producing the fruit. Because if you just focus on the fruit and say, okay, I'm good because I have the fruit, then you're ignoring the sap, which is actually feeding you, and you're causing destruction. So wonderful. Thank you. Next up is Bill. Bill, go ahead.
Thanks. I've been reading Amy Edmondson's book. She worked for Bucky and she's brilliant. And she's written many books. I've been reading her 1986 book in which she explains what Bucky meant by certain things. And I'd like to screen share some quotes from that book if I could.
Sure. Let's try to keep it brief. Give me just a second. I'm going to go ahead and, okay, go ahead.
Let's see. Can you guys see that?
It's coming up. Yes.
Okay. Can you see when my cursor moves like this?
Yep.
So these are direct quotes from Amy's book summarizing Bucky's thinking. Nature structuring occurs according to the requirements of minimum energy. Self-structuring according to the path of least resistance, the requirements of minimum energy. Bucky gives a geometry of economical relationships. The coherence of structures defined in terms of stability, what makes a structure stable. And so I want to inject a note of realism into the conversation that has transpired so far. The general topic is taking into account the effects of one's actions on others. And a lot of people have said good things on that, which I agree. But I want to inject a note of realism by saying that it's costly to take into account the effects of one's actions on others. And so when it comes to the path of least resistance, the requirements of minimum energy, the stability of a practice of taking into account the effects of one's actions on others, there's a basic selection mechanism at work that determines which efforts to take into account the effects of behavior on others will be stable or not stable. And it's pervasive in society, the economy, and the polity, and it's this. If the costs of solving a problem are higher than the costs of letting the problem go unsolved, it's actually more efficient to let it go unsolved. You see this in nature, a landslide. The effects of a landslide, it knocks down trees, but that's just, nature doesn't put the trees back up. It lets the trees fall down. So the question is, which effects of one's behavior on others, is it less costly to, well, let me back it up and say it in 2 or 3 sentences. So when it comes to taking into account the effects of one's behavior on others, it's too costly to take into account all of the effects of all of one's behavior on others. To do that, the cost of doing that would be greater than letting that problem go unsolved. So the question is, which of the effects of one's behavior on others to take into account and which ones not to take into account. You can tell, I'll close with this since you asked me to be brief. You can tell a long story of human history based on a focus on which unintended negative consequences of behavior got taken into account by laws or self-restraint, and which ones didn't. And the difference between the ones that did and the ones that didn't, the problems that got solved and the problems that didn't get solved, is basically a difference between, well, one causal factor is that sometimes solving the problem is more costly than letting it go unsolved. Now, I realize that that doesn't sound good. It sounds pessimistic. It sounds like I'm being too much of a realist or a skeptic, but that brings me, my final point, it brings me back to Bucky. There's certain, requirements of minimum energy, which is that if the solution is more costly than letting the problem go unsolved, that's not meeting the requirements of minimum energy. That's not efficient. And so I realize this sounds like bad news to you guys, but I guess this is my closing point to capsulate it all up. It's important to be realistic if you're trying to tell people to be a saint and an altruist and only consider the effects of behavior on others and not the cost to themselves of doing that, it's not going to work. Human beings, they're not going to do that. They're not going to sacrifice themselves completely to take into account the effects of their behavior on others. They're going to be somewhat self-regarding, and that's human nature. So I hope I haven't bummed you all out, but I think that's the way of the world. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Can you stop sharing?
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, this is a very large issue. Thank you for bringing that up. This is a large issue. The way, for example, I mean, I'm going to go into things that just come to my mind right away. For example, when there are a couple of things here. One would be to look at it in terms of kind of political structures, right? What should be there in the Constitution? What should be there in the Declaration of Independence? What is the minimum thing that you need to enforce to make possible maximum amount of action to be with that? So you don't want a very large set, you want a small set of things to design for that. The way in which it is implemented in the New Testament is to say that the goodness, how to put it, at the individual goodness results in goodness of certain kind of interaction with others. True, you have to give up many things, and there are always costs. There are always costs, and you have to look at the cost. And but it's a question of universal. So always kind of looking for universal, which will solve the problem for you as an individual. And so it's like a yes and kind of a principle, instead of saying this or that. So you're trying to look for commonalities and trying to come up with a solution for the commonalities. So that's the only thing I would say. Next up is going to be Katie, followed by Jeannie, Joe, and Jeff. Katie.
Well, it sounds like if you can't, I guess another part of the thing is also planning and not making a plan for the whole project in advance, like planning maybe like, oh, well, we're gonna try this out for a little bit. I know for me, I'm working on a huge project and I always plan in a half a day for whatever was unexpected. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen, but something's gonna happen. I don't know what it is yet, but that's my time for that X factor. And then the actions, I like how Mona's talking about the fruit of the actions, and then whatever it is, other people are acting on us, nature's acting on us. It's not yet, it's a, yeah.
Thank you. Another angle on this is the nature. Like if you look at kind of things in nature, they have a certain natural beauty. It comes from actually a lot of things being left out, and it is beautiful. So it is efficient and beautiful at the same time. So people like Bucky, people like Louis Sullivan, they are focused on functions which actually are functions in nature. So they're very much of realist that create forms that allow for the continuation of the function. So there is a deep realism that these folks have, and it is deeply, idealist. So they're idealist and realist at the same time by identifying principles in nature and in human nature. And that's the entire program for Bucky or for people like Louis Sullivan. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Jeff. Joe.
I think Jeannie was before me.
Oh, Jeannie was there. Oh, sorry. Jeannie, go ahead. Jeannie, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I know, it's just difficult.
Sure.
I'm glad you brought up the example of the bee and flower, which I absolutely hate. And I know it was an example that Bucky used, but the bee and the flower developed fairly recently in the Cretaceous, along with the late dinosaurs. I mean, there were things before that that were similar, but these are recent developments in evolution, and it's no accident that they developed along together. It's not an unintended consequence in any way. Now, let me give you a good example of precession that you can probably deal with better. You're on a river. The river is flowing down, and you want to go to the other side where your friend is. Okay, you start across. If you go straight, you're not going to end up with your friend, right? You're going to end up downriver because the river is pushing you. That's a precessional force. Now, you could start out and head upriver, swimming as hard as you can, and the river will push you down to your friend, right? But you have expended a lot of extra energy and it might not even work. A better example would be to tell your friend to walk downriver a little bit, start straight across, the river will take you and you will end up somewhat down the river. This is the use of precessional force for your own good. You know, it's not something that you can't calculate or figure out. You can actually use it to, use the forces of the universe to help you to do what you want to do. And I wanted to say something about minimum energy, and just think of how much would be saved in our economy and in our politics if people just spent more time thinking. Now, that is a real minimum energy activity. If you just think, or even if you talk, I mean, these are so much less than, trying to build something or force something else into being that really doesn't need to be. So I think I'm totally with Amy on the minimal energy, but it's us. We need to use our energy, and harness the forces of the universe and use it in a minimal way. But it's no excuse for not thinking about what we do and saying, it just happened. No, it didn't just happen. It's orchestrated by, primarily us. We're the ones that are running the planet. And, you cannot cop out. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeannie. Next up is Joe, followed by Jeff. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I too am also with the minimum energy. And I think that that's very important. I think that what Fuller talks about whenever he is talking about whole systems. And he also talks about the idea of cosmic accounting. So not necessarily looking at it just in financial and monetary terms. So if we're talking about cost, that's how, it's beyond what he's looking at, beyond the material. But I think the other part about that is that Fuller's main point was when he was talking about the idea of the use of energy is that how markets are polluted by certain behaviors specifically. And that actually causes us to misuse energy and that we're actually inefficient in the way we approach problems. And so this is the idea that where ephemeralization kind of comes in, where we should actually be doing more with less, and we're not necessarily achieving that. So that he looks at the whole, but this also has direct relations to integrity. Coming back to one of the other points that I think is really important, is that the integrity of the idea itself is actually compromised when a market is distorted by a special interest or a corporation or something along those lines. He also had a lot of commentary on that. So I think that there is he looked at things in a more, when he talks about minimum energy, he says, yes, that's the way we should go, but it's not where we are. So, and I think that and he was talking about the distortions from how we deviate from nature as part of the issue. So I think that that's one of the ways of actually interpreting also Amy's quotes.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Jeff, and then we will go to integrity. Jeff.
So I want to appreciate something that Jeannie said and then agree and disagree with it. So Jeannie, I want to appreciate what you said, that too great an acceptance of unintentional consequences can be an excuse for not having adequately thought something through, for not having adequately consulted the stakeholders of something, for not adequately have gotten the input and the feedback from decisions on issues that from people who will be affected. One of my mentors always used to say, whatever we start out to do, even with the best of intentions, without the input and the feedback from those that we're trying to serve, things we wish to do for people, we will end up doing to them. And I thought that was a very wise thing that has happened many times. And however, I think that we also need to acknowledge and appreciate that, one, there are always things that are beyond our control. And we don't know what they're going to do. From the earth to the competitor on the other side of a tennis court. And there are always things that we don't know that we don't know. And so we're not, our knowledge is never perfect. As wonderful and perfect as it might seem to us from our singular vantage point and perspective, or even collective vantage point and collective perspectives. And so, one of the great examples I want to just cite, I want to go back to Shrikant's example here with regard to the US Constitution. I think the US Constitution is a fantastic example where people made very, very difficult compromises with things that they felt like they couldn't deal with at that moment, and still bring the people in what was to become this country together. They made phenomenal compromises that some people would say they never should have made, and that led to a very bloody, terrible civil war, and that still affect the country as it is now. And yet, I think that some things were inadequately considered, and I think some things also that are even in the Constitution have resulted in unintentional outcomes. Some things that are actually there that then have been interpreted now in ways that were never even dreamed of, never even imagined by the people who were living in that time, that are nonetheless hugely consequential. I don't think they ever imagined that a country of 220 million adults could have 370 million guns. I don't think they ever imagined such a thing. And that there has been an inadequate ability to reconsider and change things that were unintended at the time. And I'll stop it there, but I think it's a great example of unintended consequences by people who were meaning to do the very best that they could at the time.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. We'll go to Jeannie, and then we'll go to the next topic of integrity. Jeannie.
Well, I love what you said. I agree. Certainly we humans are not that smart. You know, we can't figure out everything that's going to happen in the future. But that brings up the big stakeholders are the beings in the future. And we can't ask them. We can't ask the animals and plants that are on Earth right now what they feel about it. You know, the real stakeholders in this is more than just a bunch of human beings. It's a bunch of other things too. And other things of the future that we can't imagine. So, you know, if you want to consider stakeholders, you know, all we're considering in these other things is the stakeholders of the present, not even the next generation. And I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about all life. It's got to be much, much broader. And I did want to say something else. Let me see what I wrote here. Yeah, I think I probably said enough. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jeannie. Folks, this is going very well. I really like the whole range of comments. So we've now looked at precession and connected it to universe and integrity. Now we're going to start with integrity. So folks, comments about integrity. What is it? And what is it? How is it connected to precession? And how is it connected to Buckminster Fuller's notion of universe? Let's start with Mona. Mona, go ahead. Or give me just a second. I want to make sure. Yes, go ahead, Mona.
Okay. I was itching to get in the conversation about this one because I feel like it's so important and so connected to the previous topic. We are approaching the conversation with the state of mind that we are us, that we have to figure it out with our consciousness and our knowledge of the present. And this is us, like the little old me here, who's going to do it. But the reality is there is so much more to me that I am aware of, and so much more to you that you're aware of, and then so much more to everything else that we are aware of. And that is at work at all times. I don't believe for a second that the parts of us that we are unaware of are just idle. And I believe that whatever is needed for the next step in our evolution will emerge. And then that's how I view integrity, that if we view ourselves as a whole, the part that we know and the huge part that we don't know, but that's also alive and coming into being. And then this is how I understand, again, Krishna's comments to Arjuna, like dedicated to me, like do it in my name, because that comprises everything. So that's my view. I probably am, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but that's how I view things.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. The person who has talked quite a bit about this is Carl Jung. He regards this whole as the self, part of which is conscious and part of which is unconscious. And what happens is that it is there. Even if you're unconscious of it, it is there. And it's a question of your attitude towards it, of your openness to it. Because many of us, you know, the way it shows up, it shows up at the edge of consciousness, especially in things that we don't, you know, that we're saying, okay, I'm really screwing up here. And that realization kind of comes at the edge. And most of us actually run away from that, you know, evade that. And it's all about being open to that and kind of saying yes to that and expanding the consciousness into that. So that openness to everything, within you, around you, about other people too, people, the I-thou relationship that we're talking about, the Martin Buber's, is all about openness. You're kind of genuinely curious. You're authentically trying to relate to other people. And that is what allows you to actually understand yourself more, because the other person is different from you. It's the same principle of looking at these three concepts. If you just look at one concept, you get focused only on that and you don't see its connections. So excellent point. Thank you. Thank you so much. Next up is Joe, followed by Maritza. Joe.
Yeah, so actually when it comes to when you're looking at the connection, I guess, between precession and integrity, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that you're identifying patterns within both systems. So there are patterns for integrity, and then there's patterns within the system itself with the idea of precession. So I think that that's one commonality. But when I think of integrity, I also think of the idea of how things are interconnected and how harmonious things are actually. And if you think about it, it's not only the integrity, if you think about it in terms of the integrity of the individual themselves, how do their actions actually align with their beliefs? That's like one way of actually thinking about it. And then you're actually thinking and contemplating what your actions are. So that means you actually have a way of obtaining knowledge and acting wisely in the world. So you're applying the knowledge and you have an understanding that you can start to perceive reality properly. So I think that leads to integrity. So that the information that you're taking in, that's an important part of what Fuller is talking about, personal integrity. But I also think that there's the integrity of systems and structures themselves and how they actually hold themselves together. And that's part of one of the key parts of when you think about the geodesic domes, or it's the structures that, Fuller talks about, the tetrahedron and everything, is the integrity of those structures. It's a minimum system that he's trying to create, where there's actual fewer and fewer resources actually being used and energy is being maximized within that system. So, and that's what he's talking about, thinking about things outside of the current system and thinking through nature, and not necessarily just thinking within the current paradigm. So, and I think that that's there are really good examples of that. We can maybe get back to in a minute, where there have been shifts of how people have thought outside the system and actually ended up creating things much cheaper and much more efficient and much better. That comes from your own personal integrity, that you're actually applying your ideas, you're coming up with something new. You're not necessarily following what already is existing. So there's that element of integrity as well. And again, I think that the interrelationship aspect of it is a very important part. So there's a lot of other Fuller concepts that come within to play with that. But anyway, that's just some.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. So when I think about integrity, I think the notion of character comes in, because integrity is it's like identity of you, and that actually pulls together all your faculties, all your elements. So there is no nothing like knowing something if you're not going to act on it. That kind of comes part of it, the actions and knowledge. So your understanding, your conduct, and your devotion. So your emotions, your thoughts, your understanding, and your actions are all kind of together as one when you want to look at integrity in terms of a person. Go ahead, Joe.
I'll just say this, it's not focusing on the parts, but actually focusing on the whole. And that's how, and that's one of the most important parts when we assess even ourselves by a part and we identify with one part of our lives, as opposed to looking at our lives as a whole, then we're out of alignment. So if you identify with one particular task that you're doing, and that's your identity, then you're out of balance. So that's actually a very important part of integrity. It's not looking at the parts, it's looking at the whole. And that's not only for structure, that also incorporates structures. But I also say there's a lot in terms of when we're talking about it in terms of stoicism a lot, is that when you evaluate one action that you've taken and you judge yourself by that one action, you're only judging the part, you're not judging the whole. So and if you make that assessment, you'll have a distorted view of reality. Say that action was positive, then that would be actually a distorted perspective. If it were negative, it would be a distorted perspective. And that's where it's kind of that narrow line thinking, like almost that takes us out of alignment, that compromises our own integrity mentally and personally and character.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Maritza, Bill, and Jeannie. Maritza.
Think of integrity as kind of like the tuning fork for both, precession and our interactions with the universe, because integrity is going to be the guiding force or guideline, as it were, for how it is that we kind of make choices, because integrity is what will help us align with our core values and innermost principles. And then if you're acting with integrity, you're going to be more conscious, because the stronger your sight on your inner values, each foot forward is going to have to include integrity to maintain course. So to me, integrity is that it's the guide light, the guiding beacon, as it were. And in being a guiding beacon, it's going to reflect maybe the general principles of all of the universe, for the same reason, because it's going to force, or not force, maybe force is too strong, but maybe it's going to bring us into alignment with I don't know if I want to say divine, but to a degree, I think it works to say that as a guiding beacon, integrity would act to align us with our divine essence of interconnectedness, as it were. So if we're accepting Bucky's concept of universe as all of, it's everything. And so this giant web of existence is going to be brought more into a expression of oneness, as it were. And it's going to be through integrity that we get there. Like it's showing, when we're looking at precession, acceptance, responsibility, those are concepts that are going to be co-creators in our walking forward with a little bit more conscious effort to be in alignment with maybe a harmonious or more balanced state. So hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. There is one term that you use that I want to focus on. You said, inner. I think it's all about kind of acting from your core, being true to yourself. We've used the term center and periphery. There are kind of peripheral things, and then there is a center. And it's a very delicate concept. It is your conscience, your atma, whatever you want to call it, kind of, so being, acting from there and acting towards that. And that's another, because that's where everything, all the lines come together. They come from that point and return to that point. So that's, that's a great way of thinking about integrity, I think. Next up is going to be Bill, followed by Jeannie. Bill.
Can I screen share something again?
Okay, but let's be brief, okay? Because I want to make sure that
just time me, and if I reach the end of my time, just say, you're done, Bill.
All right.
Just I can set a timer for 3 minutes. I'll see if I can do it in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, here we go.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Perfect.
So I'll screen share more quotes from Amy, who's quoting Bucky himself. Let's see here. Okay. You guys can see my cursor. So this is Amy quoting Bucky on structure and integrity and stability. Bucky says structure is defined as a locally regenerative pattern integrity of universe. A good starting point, says Amy. Structure is also, quoting Bucky, a complex of events interacting to form a stable pattern. So for Bucky, integrity and stability are synonyms. So it raises the question of stability versus instability. If we're going to talk about whether something has integrity or lacks integrity, we can also talk in synonyms, whether it has stability or instability. So I'm not talking about individual moral integrity now. I'm talking about the integrity of a group pattern, a group structure, be it in the economy, society, or the polity. And so what I want to suggest is that when it comes, I want to sound a note of humility, similar to what Jeff and Mona said, where Jeff said that there's a lot of things we don't know and a lot of things we can't control out there in society. And Mona said there's a lot of things we don't know about ourselves and can't control within ourselves. And so it's kind of like a surfer on a wave, who cannot control the wave, may not even understand it. The surfer can either be in alignment with the forces in that wave, stable on the surfboard, or out of alignment with the forces on that wave and fall off the surfboard, be unstable and fall off. It's the same with efforts to take into account the negative effects of our behavior. And I want to put on the table 3 examples where efforts to take into account the negative effects of behavior themselves, those efforts caused unintended negative consequences that were horrible for millions and millions of people. So one would be the Soviet Union, which was a well-intentioned effort to take into account the negative effects of industrialization. But the Soviet Union itself wound up collapsing economically. A second example was the Cultural Revolution in China in the 1960s, which was attempting to take into account the negative effects of human nature by reforming human beings into a different human nature. It was well-intentioned, but it had horrible negative consequences. Millions of people died, the economy tanked, etc. There are other examples in history. So the point is, it's really tough to make really large changes to incorporate the negative effects of behavior on a social, economic, and political level. And that goes to another quote from Amy in her book. This is my final point, where Amy herself says we need to do incrementalism. And this is a summary of her book examining large-scale change. Oh, that's my 3-minute mark. I'll take an extra 15 seconds just to get this point. She wrote a book about large-scale change through teams of collaborators. And this is the summary of the book. And here's the key line. When it comes to big teaming with intense collaboration, it demands leadership combining an expansive vision with deliberative incremental action. Not an easy balance. Incrementalism is the key to avoid trying to make big changes all at once with horrible unintended negative consequences. You have to proceed incrementally. I'll stop there. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Bill. Just one question. How does this connect to integrity?
Because integrity or lack of integrity is the same as stability and lack of stability. So when it comes to solving the problem of unintended negative consequences of people's behavior by coming up with new rules, some kind of solution, that solution will only be stable and sustainable and productive on net in the long run and have integrity in that sense if it avoids the unintended negative consequences of the solution roadmap itself. So that's what we want. We want solution roadmaps that have stability and integrity in the sense of stability rather than being unstable in the sense that they have all sorts of unintended negative consequences that make the cost of the solution greater than the cost of letting the problem go unsolved.
Got it. Thank you. Let's do one thing. We'll go to, can you stop sharing, please?
Yeah.
All right. So, Maritza, can you read out the description of integrity once more? I just want to make sure that we remain, focused on what Bucky means by integrity.
This is a synopsized version of
Yeah.
Bucky's definition. Integrity involves maintaining the essential stability and coherence of a system or structure. In his work, he often emphasized the importance of integrity as a guiding principle for design and decision-making. Bucky believed that by designing with integrity, we could create systems that harmonize with the principles of nature and enhance the well-being of both humanity and the planet.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Next up is Jeannie.
And I'm ready to speak. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate what you're saying, and I actually wanted to talk about incrementalism a little bit myself. I think, Katie kind of had it right. When you're making a plan and you make yourself somewhat flexible when you're making it, and you know that it's not going to all turn out exactly as you had, you can't just make a giant grand plan. You can, but there's a big chance of failure when you make a grand plan. If you do experiments, reflect on those experiments, keep pushing forward, it brings it to the trim tab idea, which is basically a rudder. And if you throw that rudder around, this way and that way, this boat is just going to go into a spin. It's, everything will be out of control. You have to keep things at a small level at first until you figure out if they're working. But, something like global warming, we knew since the 70s that it was a problem. It's not like, all of a sudden we have this big problem and we had no idea it was coming. No, we knew, but we didn't do the small experiments. We didn't incrementally work to make it better by now. And now we've got a big problem. So, because it is such a big problem, the solution is going to be somewhat big, but it's probably going to be a number of things, not just one, item that everybody has to do, because that will throw everything out of stability. And I thank Katie for bringing up about the plan. It's you got to keep, reflecting on it as you go.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jeannie. Next up is going to be Jeff, followed by Maritza. Jeff.
So I think it's actually really interesting the way we've explored integrity here, because I think in common parlance, integrity means people who do what they say. There's an alignment between things that they say and what they do. And if that, that's kind of a person has integrity in a way. And then the next common version of it is really with regard to conscience and morality. That does that person have a moral compass, or core values? But I think that what Bucky's talking about is also a very important thought with regard to integrity. It's a little bit like, kind of maintaining the tension in a system, but the idea of integrity as relating to systems and thinking systemically and seeing things as related to each other systemically, And in kind of in the way that in the discipline of sociology, they talk about the institutions of family, law, economy, governance, education. These are systems that have a certain connection within them, as well as, you know, more broadly to each other. But the idea of integrity as maintaining the understanding that everything is related to everything, that everyone is related to everyone, that changes made for one entity or on one consequential topic or on one public policy or even one action taken actually will have an impact on everything else in a system, is actually seeing the integrity of systems. And I think that that's what Bucky is pointing us towards. And I think it's what Bill was referring to actually with regard to the continuing improvement of institutions and systems, that the wise orientation to that is to do those improvements incrementally in order to avoid huge, stupid mistakes that even by unintended consequence can make you look back and think, wow, I wish we'd just left that alone. So that's my story.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Next up is going to be, let's see, Maritza, Bill, and Joe, and then we will go to the universe. Maritza.
So, you know, I wanted to bring up something that Bucky says about integrity. You know, he says integrity is the essence. I think he goes on, he actually says it's the essence of everything. But the idea, I feel like that is just a perfect little small line to show or to interweave, you know, integrity into how it interacts with precession, how it interacts with universe. You know, what came to mind listening to Jeannie speak was that there's one more component, one more word that we haven't thrown into the mix here that I think is just vital. You know, I used the term tuning fork, but more concise would be to remind us of iteration. You know, integrity is the tool that reminds us that it's all iterative. If we are aligning ourselves with our inner core values and principles, we have to keep checking. So it's iterative process. You can't say, self, what do we believe? Okay, we believe A, we're running 1,000 miles an hour in direction of A. Because one day you're going to look around and go, crap, it's dark here. What happened? And the idea is you have to keep checking. So the connection here is, I think it's, interestingly enough, the connection is to keep a connection. And that's a very unpretty way to say it, but it's through the conscious effort to walk forward with the integrity that we will remain interconnected with both universe and the concept of precession. Because the moment we start just kind of flopping about and we let go of the integrity, or we don't realize even that it has slipped away, well, now we're out of alignment. And we're not doing an iterative dance. We're just going in one direction. And now we are no longer interwoven with what is best for ourselves and by extension, universe. And the by extension includes the concept of precession. You know, Bill and Jeannie were talking about this, you know, they're talking about little bits, but I would say it's more of a thing that yes, we cannot just conceive universe in one, even though Bucky speaks of looking at the whole, but it's not a static thing. You look at this here and then you move forward, but you have to keep going back, and several different stuff that we've looked at here together. We've spoken about the iterative nature of systems. So if we remember that we are a system, universe is a system. That's kind of like the key to weaving it all together. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Next up is going to be Bill, Joe, and then we'll go to the universe. Bill.
Thanks. I want to connect back to what Jeff talked about when he mentioned institutions. So institutions in society, the economy, and the polity, historically, for a long time, and there's lots of evidence for it, have achieved two goals. Number one, they've harnessed self-interest, which alone can be harmful, for mutual benefit. And the second thing that institutions have done is they've reined in the negative side effects of self-interested behavior. Not perfectly, but at least to a measurable extent, partially. So when it comes to harnessing self-interest, which alone is harmful for mutual benefit, that relates to precession. When it comes to reining in the negative side effects of self-interested behavior, that's points us in the direction of integrity of social systems in the sense of sustainability and stability, so that the negative side effects don't get out of hand. And so the reason I'm mentioning this is because these rule structures embody a kind of collective wisdom. Now, it's not perfect, I admit that. And there's all sorts of problems that people have pointed out around not solving the global warming problem and plenty of others. But historically, over a long run period, when you look at it, there's been slow, gradual improvement. And the three examples that come to mind are: one, free markets with anti-monopoly laws have produced more stable, sustainable economic growth than markets where monopolies are allowed, government-sanctioned monopolies are allowed, number one. Number two, electoral democracy has produced more stable political organization than authoritarianism. Authoritarianism has coups and revolutions, etc. Whereas, in this country, for example, 230 years of stable democracy. And the third example I want to give is key for a lot of the things that are being spoken of today. And I'll close with this, and that is network cooperation. And for that, I want to put up a quote on the screen.
Let's go ahead and just read it because we are running out of time.
Okay. The quote says, in a setting where there's cooperators and defectors, this is evolutionary game theory, the cooperators can prevail by forming network clusters where they help each other. And there's a simple rule that determines whether network reciprocity is stable and mutually productive for the cooperators. The benefit to cost ratio must exceed the number of neighbors. In other words, to put it in simple layman's terms, if the network is too big, and each member of the network has too many neighbors, then it's too costly to cooperate. So what you see in civil society in a democracy, not just in this country, but in Germany, France, Japan, Australia, is you see the most productive forms of cooperation in small groups through decentralized solutions and things building up from there, rather than big top-down solutions like Soviet communism or, Chinese communism in the Cultural Revolution, which were big top-down. So I'll stop there. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Next up is going to be Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I almost trying to kind of remember what I was going to say here.
That's fine. You don't have
I'm thinking, yeah. It was I can work it in actually with the next round. Yeah.
What I want to do is I don't want to lose Bucky's approach to integrity, which I think is unique. And if you look at the modern way of thinking about integrity, you basically miss the heart of where he's coming from. Okay, he's very, very different thinker than modern thinkers. And integrity is one of the core ideas that he has. So I'm going to read a quote, a fairly lengthy quote of him. Joe, go ahead. You have to talk about, go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of remember what I was going to say now. Is this idea, this incremental progress is actually something that is, good. But I think that one of the things that we need to distinguish is the difference between effectiveness and efficiency. And many times that I think we do things that are much more efficient. And that is one of Bucky's principles where we're talking about ephemeralization. If we're doing more with less, that means you're doing things more effectively. That means you're actually doing things differently. So that's where his principles actually are different in the sense that it's not necessarily like this large scale change. Ephemeralization is incremental in itself, but it's also the type of changes that are actually being made in the interim. So I think that it's not just looking at the current cost of something, it's looking at the future as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. So again, folks, I mean, the reason we study these things is to actually commune with the ideas of the people that we are studying. And there is tremendous value to that. So let me go ahead and close this part with a lengthy quote from Bucky on integrity. I want you to think about this as individuals. An individual will say to me, what can I do? What can I do? I'm just a little tiny guy. And I say, what you can do, I'm repeating something I've said to you earlier, that we are really in the final examination. I did get last night to you that we are a function in the universe. We are here for local universe information gathering, local problem solving in the support of integrity of an eternally regenerative universe. But integrity is the essence. In an invisible world, there is no visible aesthetics. In an invisible world, there is no visible aesthetics. In an invisible world, only aesthetic is integrity. In our great computer world we are going into. So I simply say, I'm really confronting you with the way I have lived through all that because I was a comprehensivist. I have kept the record. That's the only reason I'm able to say all these things to you. I'm up to. I'm giving you a very faithful record of what's going on economically. So I simply say, what can you do personally? What you can do personally is to commit yourself to what is the truth. That is all. You have to remember that we didn't invent the design of the universe, and we are not running the universe. I'm absolutely willing to give credit to the, like what the Indians say, the Great Spirit. The word God tends to infer a human being's form. So I say Great Spirit. So you realize that I don't mean anthropomorphic when I say God. But if you operate with integrity, God wants to know right now whether human beings have the courage to go along with their own minds, or do you have to go along with the crowd? Do you have to go evenly with the game, or are you going to dare? If we really dare to go with our minds, we will stay here. We will go into an entirely new era in humanity. It will not be a matter of earning a living. You will be doing what you see needs to be done because you will feel you want to do it. You will want to qualify to be able to serve one another. There will be nothing you will have to question at all about earning a living. At any rate, personally then, we've got 2 minutes to this session. It comes back to each one of you as the numbers multiply of individuals who are really going to commit themselves to integrity, whatever truth may be, and really commit themselves to making all humanity a success. You have to ask yourself a question: are my reflexes so conditioned that I resent someone else enjoy themselves? Am I really willing to really love my humanity, my fellows? If you do that, we will win. If we can do that, do it. If it is spontaneously arousable in you to operate with integrity and really go along to love comprehensively, that is. Thank you very much. Bless your hearts. Okay, so I just wanted Bucky to have the last word, because it's a very, very different view of integrity than is commonly thought of in modern times. It is intensely personal and it is intensely social at the same time, without seeing any contradiction between the two. So I strongly recommend, we are discussing his ideas, but ultimately you have to keep going back to his own writing in full format in order to get what he is trying to say. Next up, on the universe. Again, we're talking about universe as defined by Bucky. So and again, we are talking about universe. So universe, let's see. Maritza, do you have the definition of universe handy? Just
Give me
definition
just a minute.
of universe. I'm trying to pull it up too. Yeah, there it is. The aggregate. I have defined universe as the aggregate of all men's consciously apprehended and communicated experiences. Okay, this operational definition allows us to consider man and universe as a manageable finite whole, about which we can say and know, about which all we can say and know is encompassed within the accumulated experience of all men. All right, so that's what we're talking about. So go ahead. All right, so go ahead and type an exclamation mark. I think I have to find out who has. Let's see here. Joe, did you put the exclamation mark? Or was it from last time?
Last time.
Okay. All right. Who would like to talk about the universe? And universe is the aggregate of all humanities.
Well, I just posted the definition from Synergetics in there for folks.
Wonderful. All right, folks, if you'd like to talk about universe, see, now we are coming to the close of this meetup. So now we have to bring it all together. So let's do our best to do that. Let's go with Jeannie. Jeannie, go ahead.
Well, it's interesting that he brings in the human experience in here, because by choosing to consider everybody's experience, and perhaps, the experience of other forms of life too, is this animal suffering, because of the conditions? Is this tree, dying? Consider those experiences, and then you really have a much more compassionate integrity. So that didn't bring in universe, did it? But he said that that the universe is the aggregate of experiences. So I guess it does bring in the universe in a way. But the main thing that I like to think about it is that the universe has its own life, and we can use that in an efficient way to enhance. I mean, the universe put us here, we're meant to be here. And it's not trying to just kill us off, otherwise we would be gone already. So, you know, if we're here and we consider everybody else's experiences and everything, then you would think we would have the integrity to go forward in a positive way.
Thank you, Jeannie. I mean, the definition that Buckminster Fuller has for universe is very different from the traditional definition of universe. So it is more closely to almost like a world culture, because it is the aggregate of all experiences, you know, all humanity is consciously apprehended and communicated experiences. So it's kind of the more, if you want to use a traditional term, it is closer to like world culture, as best as I understand the idea of what he's getting at. And let's go with, would love to see what you think is what it is and how it is connected to integrity and how is it connected to precession. Joe.
I mean, I'm just going to say that it aligns directly, and I know this is just coming from my own bias, but with Stoic cosmopolitanism, the idea of the interconnectedness of everyone, and that our experiences are micro, and they are on a, you know, micro individual level, but that we also need to see ourselves part of a greater, as the Greeks would say, cosmopolis, seeing us part of a whole, and that our actions do have meaning, and so that and that we're partially overlapping is part of that interconnectedness. Is that, you know, somehow our actions all kind of come together and have an impact on one another. This is interesting in a very practical sense, that if you look at yourself like that, it's transcendent in a way. It transcends groupthink, in the sense that local groupthink and tribal groupthink, in the sense that where you see the other as a adversary as opposed to a partner. So I think that that's another aspect of that I've always liked about cosmopolitanism, is that if you don't necessarily identify with one particular aspect, whether it be, you know, your family, your country, whatever it may be, you identify yourself with, you know, being an actor in the universe, then you start to really think for yourself. And there's a certain level of the individual as well as the social aspect of it, so that's related. And that's why I always thought that that was an interesting concept from cosmopolitanism that actually directly relates to what Bucky is talking about.
Great observation, Joe. I think the cosmopolitan is the same idea. It is definitely held by Bucky, because what it is saying is something very deep. It is saying that, you know, there is cosmos. So basically it's universal. And you are a citizen of the cosmos. So it is saying that, you know, focus on the universal principles on one thing and let those flow through you. Secondly, what it is saying is that respect all the differences that there are and see what you can learn from them, and, you know, interact with everybody, all of humanity, not only in space, but in time, because that is you. You know, that is the part that is universe. You're actually a part of it. You know, I have to say this, but there is no person that I knew that who embodied that as well as CJ did, because he not only had things that he was passionate about himself, but systematically he would look to the other to find things and integrate them into his own life and encourage others to do that. And it was just it was the best example that I have seen of that approach of saying, so because you're saying yes to the entire of humanity. That's what you're doing when you're using this definition. You're saying yes to the entire humanity. You're saying yes to all of the human endeavors, not just science or technology that you might be focused on, but also art. Not just the culture that you are in, but every culture that there is. And you're taking in all of that and saying, this too is human. This too is part of the universe. Next up is going to be Jeff, Maritza, and Bill. Jeff.
Well, one of the most interesting phrases in that definition is humanity's consciously apprehended experience. And I wonder what that means. What does it mean, humanity's consciously apprehended experience? I'm curious about that.
Sure. So a couple of things here. So it is, the interesting thing, it is consciously apprehended and communicated. So he's saying all the sum of knowledge, everything that was grasped by everybody, that they were, whatever they were conscious of, and communicated. So it is like individual when it comes to consciously apprehended, and social. So that and that. And he's embracing all of that.
What would you say the definition of apprehended is in that context?
Grasp. So it's like you mentally grasp something. So that's what he means. So it's really kind of closer to the concept of culture. Traditionally, what we think of as culture, and this he's talking about world culture, and he's talking about all culture over all time, and he's kind of saying yes to that, and he regards that to be your domain. It's like we are citizens, as Joe was pointing out. You're citizens of cosmos. Actually, even the Stoics, part of, again, the implicit there is civilization itself. So that's, you're a member of that. Thank you. Next up is going to be Maritza, Bill, and Katie. Maritza.
Oh, she can't. Since I come after Jeff, I'm actually going to not speak personal comments, and I'm going to regurgitate Bucky. So in his definition of universe, so that's his definition. In his synergetics, he goes on and he gives you definitions of many of the terms used in his definition. He tells us that apprehension means information furnished by those wave frequencies tunable within man's limited sensorial spectrum. Communicated means informing self or others. And he says overlapping is used, because every event has duration. Now, I want to switch over to his book, Man in Universe. And he, or maybe it's not a book. So these are his words, and he's talking about universe, and he says, at the outset, it is imperative that we assume man, the earth, and the universe of which this forms a part as our prime frame of reference. This fundamental relationship is our only relative constant. From consideration of a comprehensive framework, we may proceed to those broad earth/man interactions and specific patternings which constitute our present position in time. I have defined universe as the aggregate of all men's consciously apprehended and communicated experiences. This operational definition allows us to consider man and universe as a manageable, finite whole, about which we can say and know about which all we can say and know is encompassed within the accumulated experience of all men. And then I'm going to skip a little and say, he says, we can comprehend this whole because it is, in essence, the macrocosmic version of each individual life experience. We are all, in effect, miniature universes. Each personal life and experience is a micro universe. To me, Srikant, that is Bucky's words for showing us how these three interconnect.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Marissa, for reading that. That's great. I always like to let people speak for themselves because they actually will tell you what they exactly mean. Next up is going to be Bill, followed by Katie. Bill.
Thanks. In that original quote that was read maybe 10 minutes ago, that long quote from Bucky, he talked about conformity and nonconformity and how it's important to not conform with just going along with what everyone else is doing. I want to give an example of how it can be challenging to find a middle road between total conformity with what everyone else is doing with negative effects.
Bill, we're talking about universe here. We're just talking about universe and how it connects to other things. Bucky's notion of universe.
So you gave that long quote of
that was on integrity. That was wrapping up what was said about integrity.
Okay.
I want to focus on what Bucky's doing. There are three ideas that we're focused on. So we finished Precession, then we finished integrity. The reason I read out the long quote is I wanted to make sure that we don't lose Bucky's idea of integrity. Now, we're talking about Bucky's idea of universe, which is a very different. Universe is the aggregate of all humanities consciously apprehended and communicated non-simultaneously and only partially overlapping experiences.
Can I say something about that?
Please.
So that last quote about how each person has their own micro universe and then there's the overall universe. The way some social scientists think about this is that a person's universe is their subjective perceptions of their universe, and that can vary from one person to another. And in that sense, a person's universe is socially constructed, at least in part, from the group that they live in, the society they live in. Maybe it's the ethnic group or the national group or the local community, Californians versus New Yorkers, whatever. And so the reason that's important is because those solutions, those socially constructed assumptions that people use to view the world around them, solve certain problems of how to make sense of the world around them. And then those worldviews that are socially constructed can also have negative side effects. But altering them in order to improve outcomes is a tricky business because people are wedded to their it's stabilizing, it's psychologically stabilizing to have a worldview that's stable. And there's lots of historical examples where they tried to basically throw out the worldview and bring in a new one, or like all at once. And it didn't work out very well. So again, incrementalism is the key when it comes to enlarging one's worldview to a more cosmopolitan and truly objectively universal worldview. It's a challenge. It cannot be done easily or overnight.
Thank you, Bill. Now, Bucky's view is exactly opposite of the current social thinkers. His ideal is that of a great pirate. In his book, Spaceship Earth, he captures it beautifully. He says, most of the world is made up of these people who don't travel. They don't travel geographically. They don't travel outside their profession. They stay with, all of these groups. He says, he talks about the great pirates who basically take the risk, and it is very risky to go out into the ocean. It is very risky to go to a culture that you have never met, whose language you may not be able to speak, and discover, what kind of trade is possible, learn how to communicate with them. So the ideal that Bucky presents is the idea of a comprehensivist. He's saying yes to many, 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 many different groups of people. And he's trying to come up with solutions that could run across. And it is tremendously risky endeavor. It is not safe because it is much more safer to remain where you are. So, Bucky is very, very different from, most social scientists today. Next up is going to be Katie.
I think you said world culture. I would also say world history.
Yep.
Would be another way to say it, because what Philip's presentation on history about how much of history is recorded, and then how much selective, how we select our retelling of history. And then also I was going to say to Bill's comment too, with a lot of these experiments that I think people were well, eventually we learned, but sometimes not always. Like, the people might think, well, they tried it over there and it didn't work because they're different over there. So let's try it again over here and over here and over here. So sometimes we're not learning from the history.
Thank you, Katie. Also, I wanted to point out, that really Bucky is completely outside of the modern context. In modern contexts are always trying to say, okay, what can we do here? That is, the efficient cause of saying, okay, here is what it is there. What can we do with it? Okay. Bucky comes from a more actually another time, it's a scribal tradition. He gets it from his transcendental base, transcendentalism, which is also very, is connected to the Indian way of thinking. So it's a very different base. So for example, look at this concept itself, universe. He's not trying to say, what do we fix? He's saying, what is there? And I want to commune with what is there. I want to understand what is there. What is true? What is true? That's the kind of approach that he has, which is very different. All right. So now I want to get a review of how it went. This was our first experiment of doing 3 at a time. So would love to hear what you thought of this process. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to share what you got. We'll start with Joe. And if you have any suggestions, go ahead and put the suggestions down. If you thought that we did something wrong, please, would love to hear what you thought. Joe.
I thought, this was a good way to start to see the connections between a lot of different ideas like Bucky that we've been talking about here. So I think that this is actually something that's necessary, especially as the meetups themselves become a little bit more complex as we bring in, Joe Clinton again and people like that. I think that we really do need to have some of these basic concepts and understanding down. So I think that it's very helpful in that way. I think we could have squeezed a fourth.
No, it's Joe, this is not the question. The question is, we are planning to do these meetups, this series. This was the 4th idea when we looked at the meetups. So these numbers are not going to be Bucky ideas. These are going to be just 3. Either it could be 3 ideas, it could be 3 fields, it could be 3 thinkers.
I see.
And what do you think about, because you know what, we could barely cover 3.
That's true.
And 3 actually produces enough interactions, and we are not able to actually cover them in 2 hours. So I don't think 4 would work. But so what do you think about this? Don't think of it as just Bucky ideas or this particular meetup. This format of saying, okay, let's take 3 things and let's do this kind of discussion.
I think that these are good discussions. I think these are absolutely necessary part of comprehensivism and to make sure that we're actually able to connect the ideas that we're talking about. Absolutely.
Excellent. And I think your point about that, this is really the heart of comprehensivism, I think is correct. I think we should put this as a part of the comprehensivist, plan, because that's exactly what we're doing here. Wonderful. Pritsa, what did you think? You came up with this idea, so tell me.
Yes, I wanted to see, this was what it was, is I, on my own, I was like, wait, I have to go back and I have to bring that in. And I've been, you know, the more I dive into Bucky's works, the more I find myself hungering to integrate other things we've spoken about. So that's where this you know, idea was born. I think so. I do this was very good, Shrikant. I have some suggestions, maybe slash comments. I think the when we're switching between each three, so you do, you know, we're looking at how concept one interconnects with concepts 2 and 3, and then we look at concept 2 interconnecting with 1 and 3, and then concept 3 with 1 and 2. I think it would be worthwhile to attempt slightly different formats. I was thinking the idea of, you know, a lot of, it seemed like several people were answering the question of how would these weave together? So I don't know exactly how that might look, but something like if we were looking at the 3 concepts we looked at today, instead of asking how integrity is interconnected with precession and universe, maybe we would say, maybe it's differently, we would say, let's start from a presupposition that there is an interconnection. And I would like to invite everyone to come up and give me 3 words that apply to all 3 of these things. And then that would be a good way to start the juices flowing for similarities. And maybe we want to play devil's advocate and say, okay, now everybody give me, you know, 1 word, or I guess we do stay with 3s, and 3 words that we find that would be challenging to the interconnection of these 3 concepts. You kind of teased at something similar in when you did when you brought it up at our first formulary chat about this. But I just was thinking, instead of going through it by rote, each one, it might be helpful to switch it up, because I found today that it was harder to get people's minds to switch to the next concept. So it might be advantageous for us to kind of feed them in a different direction. You know, if you're constantly with every question to the group, it's addressing all 3 on the same level instead of putting one above the other 2. I think it might change the discussion a little bit. And it might also help us with remaining on topic. We did pretty good today, but I just think it might be a little bit. So anyway, there was just a couple comments that I saw there.
No, thank you. I really appreciate the comments. So firstly, I thought I did a horrible job today, because I think I let people go out for too long and go off topic too much, because then that actually reduced the time that we had. Because I was hoping to go like multiple rounds, and we were barely able to complete 1 round, which is not the right thing to do for this one. So I have to be far more disciplined about keeping, ask people to keep it very short and completely to the point. If it goes outside the point, I should stop it immediately.
Maybe one more thing, Shrikant, maybe we bring back lightning round questions without answers. And start off the, these 3 are interconnected. Give me questions on their interconnectedness.
Right. So what I'm taking from you right now is, one is the, considering 3 together instead of separately. Second is the lightning round. And third, I'm putting my point, just, really strong moderation is needed, because the more stronger the moderation we have, more rounds we will have within 2 hours. And that is going to produce really good results. Okay.
Maybe choice words, because you were pulling them out in the beginning, like you were pulling out acceptance and responsibility. It might be nice at the beginning, maybe instead of letting people talk, just give me 3 words.
3 words, yes. One idea that I have is we can use whiteboards like this. So let's see here. So collaborating whiteboards. Okay, there. So we can add here, and you can you, Maritza, can you try to write on this one so we can have, I'm going to draw, what is this? Just a second. So we can have like 1, 2, 3, so we got 1, 2, 3 over here, and we'll put the names here. This will be 1, this will be 2. Can you go ahead and just click on the pen and write something somewhere? Yeah, you can
Oh,
type
yes.
something too. You can type something too.
Didn't
So
know
we-
I could.
Are you able to do that?
Maybe.
Okay, just
Okay. Yes.
yeah, there, yeah.
Maybe nobody wants to see my chicken
Okay,
scratch.
that's fine. That's fine.
Awesome. Yes.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, so maybe we can use the visual way of organizing things, and we can go ahead and type in. Let me see if I can type. I can do the text here.
Yes.
So let's say acceptance. You see that? So we can
Yes.
go ahead and have people, even if they are not typing, they can go ahead and just say, okay, you know what? I want to put this one, and you can go ahead and create it here, and then you can create a new text box over here, and you can put something else, So we can work on it here. Culture. Let's see, culture.
Ooh, it does trees. Look.
Yeah. Perfect.
That's cool.
So I think we can use this one. Does that make sense?
Yes.
We can go ahead and do. Okay, I'm going to close this.
Sorry.
All right. So we got visual things. So I'll put that as a thing. Next up is going to be Jeannie, Bill, and Joe. Jeannie.
I don't have really anything to say about the format. You guys know what you're doing much more than I do. But I did want to say this about the universe. So if you think of the aggregate of all humanity's experience, it's just a tiny, tiny part of the universe. And the universe is expanding, and we're part of that by, going out there, exploring and seeing what's there, and trying new things and enjoying. I mean, part of it is just to enjoy the fact that there's this huge unknown thing that we're, part of. And, so I wanted to add that in as the universe. It's not all so scary. I mean, we're part of it, and we can enjoy it.
Thank you, Jeannie. All right, folks, what do you think of the format? It's going to be Bill. I like DLJ's concept of doing it as pairs. I think that would work too. That would work very well. Next up is going to be Bill, followed by Joe. Bill.
Thanks. I thought the format was great. And I think that I agree with you, Shrikant, what you said a couple hours ago, that there's something about the number 3. And what I think there is about it is that thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Those are 3 things. And that's what progress, intellectual progress based on logic and evidence is. It's thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And so the other reason I'm pleased with how it went tonight, format-wise, is that I learned something from Joseph about Bucky's writings, which is that I learned from Joseph that Bucky has written on the negative side effects of markets. And my question to you, Joseph, is can you just give me the citation? Because I want to read Bucky's own words on the negative side effects of markets and how he thought markets were polluted or somehow off in various ways. I just want to read Bucky himself. So what's the citation?
Joe, you can send it as a private message to Bill. When you get a
I'll
chance.
have to send it to you. But yeah,
You can message him on
stuff
WeChat. You can message him on
Yeah.
WeChat. Joe,
Absolutely.
what comments do you have about the format?
No, I was actually I think actually DLJ's approach, I was going to actually propose something slightly different to that, but then
Yeah.
actually he put that in the chat, and I thought that was actually no, I think DLJ's approach actually would work. So.
Okay. All right, so then let me ask you guys a question, that Bill brought up, and I want everybody's thought. Why does 3 work? Why does 3 work? Any thoughts? So, Bucky says unity is plural, minimum of 2. So why do you think 3 works? What's your answer? Anything? Maritza?
It fights the natural tendency to look at 2 as either or. So if you have 3, you're more inclusively thinking naturally.
Yeah, I think if you have just 1, you're just reacting to it, and you're just repeating whatever it is that you know. If it is 2, there is that contrast, and you're just getting locked into okay, this is different from that. And 3 actually is a much more richer complex of relationships than anything else. Bill, why does 3 work?
I want to build on what I said before about thesis, antithesis, and synthesis by giving an example of that, which is one system of perception, an opposing system of perception, and then a combined system of perception that results by getting the best of both and avoiding the negative of each. And the great example is the French Revolution. In the French Revolution,
let's not go too much into details here, because that way of looking at 3 is only one way. This is Hegel, Hegel's way of looking at it. That's only one way of looking at 3. There are many, 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 many ways of looking.
Could I just do it in 20 seconds because it's so illustrative?
20 seconds is good. Yeah.
And okay, so in the French Revolution, they threw out the old system and they adopted a new system. And after 100 years of the new system, they realized they needed to bring back some of the elements of the old system that they had thrown out because they needed those elements. And so the combined system had the best of both and avoided the negative side effects of each. So that's why 3 is great.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, folks. So there is actually many different reasons for 3. Let me see what's the best way. Like there are anyway. I'll just say that I've done a whole presentation on that yesterday about the tetrahedrons and 3 interacting loops. That's my best thought on the three-part things and what kind of interactions are possible between 3 things as a way of actually, it's like, this is the idea, I'm okay. Let me just go ahead and say it. So it's okay. Just go ahead and look at the video. It is called tetrahedron as an interaction between 3 loops. So this is what I found out yesterday. Let me see if I can show it to you. Let me show it to you. You know what? There is tetrahedrons. Everybody likes tetrahedrons. So I have to show it to you. Okay. So let me see here if I can find all of them. Okay, folks, I'm going to take a minute to show this again. All right. Okay, Maritza, can you see this properly? No, you won't be able to see it. Let me just move a little bit back so I have more space here. All right. Can you
Camera's jumping horribly.
Can you see this? Okay,
Yes.
very good. So I'll get one more. I have to get one more of the tetrahedrons. Okay, so I want to show you something that I learned about tetrahedrons. Okay, this is completely in line with Bucky, and I get to talk to Bucky folks here who like tetrahedrons. This is really, really special. So I thought there were 3 ways of looking at tetrahedrons. One like this, which privileges the vertices. One like this, which privileges the faces. And one like this, which privileges the edges. I was wrong. Okay. Thanks to Don Brittle, there is a way. There is another way. of looking at tetrahedrons, which I think is more fundamental than these three. Okay, how could that be? How could that be? Ta-da! Okay, now this is like a 2-frequency tetrahedron. Okay, but if you follow the red here, okay, so there are 3 colors. Okay, there are 3 colors. Let me go back. Okay, so there are 3 colors. So follow the green color, right? It comes up like this, down like this, and like this. It's a complete loop. It's a complete loop. The blue goes up like this, comes down like this, and like this. It's a loop. Red, up like this, down like, up like this, down, and over here. It's a loop. So it's 3 loops. You can make the tetrahedrons from 3 loops. Now, these loops are infinite loops. You can keep going around them. You can keep going round and round, okay? And they actually define the entire tetrahedron because they hit all the 4 points. But together, so they have independent existence, and they interact with one another. Okay, at the same time. Now, actually, the way in which I did not build that one. Okay, let me. Actually, this is a 2-frequency tetrahedron, right, with double. But really, the tetrahedron, if you make it, it would be just 1 frequency. So look at the red here. So it would be this red and this red. These are the only 2 reds, right? Now, what you can do is you can put a field, okay? So you can take a flexible thing that is connecting from here and connect it to this one over here. The one, you see what happens when there are 2, they are perpendicular to each other. So this one and this one. Forget about these other 2, okay? And now this one goes like this. It goes through like this over here, okay? And then it connects to this one right here, okay? So now if you look at it, it's like an infinity sign, okay? It's a loop. So this one and this one are now connected. So it is like a loop like this, 8, like infinity, okay? That you can see over here, like that, okay? And there are 3 of these. There will be 3 of these, okay? This thing, Don calls it the field. And this is the form. So this is like the functions that are, by interacting, is producing this form, which is the object. So when we think of things, we think first of forms. You know, moderns always think of forms, okay? And they really do not look at the functions. They're just looking at the forms. Whereas this way of thinking is putting functions first. So these loops which are moving. And so I did the whole presentation. So let me just do the Gita version of the presentation. Okay, I did the Gita version, which is a short version. Okay, I will do the psychology version of it and then Gita version of it. So if you look at yourself, you know, we're talking about integrity in terms of integrity of a person. Okay, we have actions which are green. We have emotions which are red, and we have thoughts which are blue. Okay, now these are horrible words to use for human beings. We moderns use it. If you move back to scribal times, when you look at Gita, Tao Te Ching, or the Bible, they don't use these words. The words that they use for the green is conduct. It's the integration of actions over time, pattern of actions that you have. The word that they use for this, red, is devotion. The one that they would use for blue is understanding. Okay, so you have your understanding, your devotion, the thing that you really care about. It's persistent, not just reactive emotion, but that's something that you really care about, what you love. And conduct, the virtuous actions. And these three things together make up the character, your character, which is the tetrahedron. They all interact with one another because they depend on one another. So they are with one another. And this is the notion of integrity. This is the notion of character, which is based on these three things. Now, if you look at, let me just take the simplest, let me just take Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita, if you look at Bhagavad Gita, it says there are 4 ways of getting to Brahma. There are 4 yogas. The first one is called Karma Yoga. That is the right conduct. Okay, and if you keep doing that, you will get to everything else. You will get to the whole. So the green is the Karma Yoga. The blue is the Jnana Yoga, understanding. The red is the Bhakti Yoga. And all of them are equivalent. As you practice one of them, you'll get better at the other ones. You will have proclivities to do one more than the other, and you can keep doing that. And you will be, as you do the right conduct, your devotion would be perfected. Your understanding would be perfected. As you understand more, you will have more devotion. You will be doing the right actions. So they all go together. And what you're trying to capture as a whole is your character. Again, the same. And there is a yoga for that, of focused on the being, focused on the truth. The truth is combination of all these 3 things. It is one. And that is called Dhyana Yoga. That is your focus, you're concentrating on the nature of the tetrahedron itself, as opposed to the loops. That Krishna talks about as being the most difficult one, because it's very easy to go wrong there by focusing on the one. So you use whichever way that that you can use. Now, obviously, the equivalent of this in the Bible is the triune nature of God. So this is God. You can look at God as the Spirit, Holy Spirit, which is red. You can look at it as the Word, which is blue, or you can look at it as truth, which is green. And all these 3, if you look at them, talk about each other, they actually love each other. And they actually pass credit on to each other. Like Son will point to the Father will point to the Spirit will point back to the Son, and vice versa. So it's the same thing. So what is going on? It's like this, So this is God with the Trinity up here. This is us here with our conduct, with our devotion, and with our understanding. And the biggest thing, so this is the view of the Bible. The New Testament is one step further than that, because God so loves the world, so it comes down like this, so that you have something in the middle, which is both divine and human. And that's the concept of Christ. So that is the idea of the New Testament. So this is a very quick view of how you can think about the three and how you can bring the three, how, the use of thinking about three. Okay. So I have a full presentation on it. This was like a very short version of the detailed presentation I have. I've just put it up on YouTube. I was reluctant to put it up because I kind of started, I had looked at Don's ideas only for 2 days, and I did not know whether I had gotten it well enough. So I sent it, I did an unlisted version of it and sent it to Don, and Don loved it. So I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and publish it. So it's on YouTube if you want to see. This is that one is much longer. It's about 30 minutes of going into details of this and the reasons for all of this. All right. So wonderful. Thank you so much, folks. See you soon. Bye.
You're muted, mate.
Trying to save the chat.
Ah, I see. Hey, Mike, are you awake? Mike, are you there? He's gone to sleep.
You should be asleep.
I sent him I should. I sent him my presentation, but he hasn't replied as to whether.
I'm awake. I'm listening in the background. Had to find the mute key.
I sent you the presentation.
I saw it. It opened
worked.
very slowly, but I think I've seen about half of it.
Okay, so it did work. I wasn't sure.
A PDF, what format? That looks like some sort of an MP4, which is a little bit difficult to read and backspace through. To be able to see it. If you have you said you have a PDF version of it?
No, but I can create one if you want one.
It would be nice. I don't know. That's something that needs to be digested, and the MP4 version is hard to digest.
Okay, so on the PDF you don't get the animation though. Okay, so there's
I'm not sure I need the animation.
Okay.
However, actually, this is not unlike what they're talking about today, about what Shrikant talked about today. In that, but it's kind of a model, and the model is not not the real world. And I map what he's talking about with the coils as as spheres that create tension and compression at each vertex of the tetrahedron. And that's you heard the presentation, Bill's presentation, yesterday also. The picture is somewhere in there, but they don't quite have it yet.
You mean Don?
Pardon?
Was it Don you were talking about?
Yeah, Don Bridell.
yeah, I saw that. Pretty cool, I thought.
It's a statement that, again, a statement of the map is not the territory.
Yeah, that's your favorite
So
line.
I think that's what you're saying.
The
too.
true one.
Yeah, and that's what you're saying too.
Yep.
Well, maybe someday we'll know the answer.
I might have some questions for you. Let's
Well,
see.
we await your revelation, DLJ. What is D? Is D stand for Don?
It does not.
David?
Correct. Well done.
Correct, okay.
You have one more guess.
Oh, it's not David?
No, it is. I'm just saying you should have.
Okay.
Everybody should get 3 guesses, even if you get it right the second time. You should still have enough.
All right. Well, there is no right, is what we're saying anyway. That whatever you can define, rose by any other name. All right, the journey continues.
It does indeed. Thanks, Mike.
Joe, do you have any comments about David's presentation?
Yeah,
'Cause I did that one too.
hey, Mike, don't call me David.
Call you
Yeah.
DLJ, okay.
It is my name, but yeah, I don't use it. So thanks.
I've made some comments already. Yeah.
Okay,
I
I guess
shared-
I
I
didn't hear
shared.
it. I'll have to wait to hear it.
Yeah, it's about, I think you need, yeah, I think you need to add states in there somehow. I think you do in a way with your, when you, on your graph with time. You just don't call them out.
Well, the dimensions are what we choose to add. If there are 14 orthogonal dimensions, it just happens we call 4 of them space X, Y, Z, and T. But that may not be what they really are anyway. That's just our
Well-
set system defined.
Would you mind, would you mind sharing your glossary, actually?
Who, Mike?
Oh, you're talking to me? I don't have a glossary.
No, sorry, DLJ.
Oh, I don't have a glossary. What glossary?
I thought you had a glossary.
Oh, I see. I've got my yeah. Oh, well, okay. It's the ITIL. You know ITIL, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'm just using their definitions or wherever, nearly always those definitions that I've used a different book for the definition for knowledge. But yeah, no, wherever possible, I'm using best practice. So I'm not inventing anything other than the word supervenient, which I've invented.
Okay, so you're using ITIL definition. All right.
Yeah, where I mean, yeah.
Well, do we really know what best practice means?
Yes.
Okay, you do. So maybe someday I'll understand. Thank you.
I don't know. I think anytime standard this, I don't know.
Yeah.
My firm.
Although best doesn't mean best, of course, because it's always improving. So that means the last time wasn't best anymore. You know.
Think about DSM though. Is that a best practice? I mean, I think the iterations have actually gotten worse and influenced by insurance and big pharma. So I don't know what we get is always best.
Well, quite. You can say the same for some international standards. They seem to have been
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. Even ISO or things like that.
Yeah.
Or UML, or even that's highly criticized.
The what's
So-
what? The
The
What?
machine for it's not UML anymore. It's something. I think it's UML was the old one. Systems modeling language now. It's
Oh.
called SysMill, but it used to be called Unite. I think Unified Modeling Language, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, it was UML. Okay, so it was UML up until recently, actually. I mean, there's a SysMill 2 out.
I don't know though.
Yeah, no, they're highly criticized though. It's what our engineers use, and actually they have some issues.
Engineering stuff. Yeah. Okay.
But it is important. Used to be in.
Great to baseline. That's the point, isn't it?
It is. You do need a baseline of some sort. Although we've had a presenter here that has come up with his own way of depicting terms that a lot of companies have picked up and done very well with. Like companies like Intel, so
Go on. You
no,
dangling
yeah, no, I mean he's presented here, Tom Gill,
here as in 52 living ideas, or here in your.
52 Living Ideas.
Oh, right. Okay.
So
All right, I'm gonna sign off. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Cheers, Mike.
take care, everyone. Good night.
Hmm.
Take care.